Welcome into Draft Primers Defense Edition. The Cardinals have 8 picks in the 2023 draft. We're going to discuss how great of a draft need each defensive position is here from the SeatGeek studios. From what we have seen, from free agency moves and the fact that both defensive coordinator Nick Rallis and head coach Jonathan Gannon come from the Eagles, it's likely the Cardinals will switch to a 4-3 defense. Pass rush was a huge problem last year for the Cardinals, who had just 36 sacks, 23rd in the league, and finished 27th with just 140 quarterback hurries. Darren, can you even argue at this point that there is a greater need, not just on defense, maybe the entire roster than defensive end in the draft for the Cardinals?
No, and it's probably very understandable why Will Anderson from Alabama is the guy that everybody thinks the Cardinals are going to take if they stay at 3 overall. Pass rusher from had just had unbelievable numbers 2 years ago. Probably would have been the #1 pick if he had come out last season. Now with the quarterbacks, he might slide a couple picks, but he would be a fantastic pick for this team. When you talk about your needs, when you look at what the Cardinals have on defensive end right now, Myjai Sanders and Cam Thomas, the rookies from last year, Victor Dimukeje from the year before, and even Dennis Gardeck, who I'm thinking will probably end up, even if they move to a 4-3, being some kind of defensive end, because I think that fits his skill set better. But I think they absolutely need to put people there. They release Marcus Golden, and there are pass rushers, there are edge rushers in this draft that are good, even if they trade down and don't get Will Anderson, which I know would break the heart of a lot of people. You've got Tyree Wilson, you've got Lucas Van Ness, you've got Nolan Smith in the first round. In the second round, somebody like B.J. Ojulari from LSU is a possibility at the top of that second round. I mean, it is a position that absolutely has to be addressed as you go forward.
It's not just the fact that they only had 36 sacks, but 18 of those, J.J. Watt and Zach Allen, are no longer on this roster. So you don't have a lot as far as the defensive end is concerned. Darren's right. There is enough depth in the draft, but everyone is pointing to Will Anderson just based on what he did at Alabama. But Tyree Wilson is another name out there as far as the Cardinals should slip out of Texas Tech. He's a lot taller, but not as productive as Will Anderson.
Take Will Anderson, give him the number 0, and let him get after the quarterback for the next decade. It's almost as difficult to find someone to get to the quarterback as it is a quarterback in today's NFL, and it's almost as expensive. So if you have a chance at number 3 to get that elite generational pass rusher, you do it. And if you're not, somebody wants number 3, then you make them pay for it in the form of multiple first-round picks.
We're just going to put Paul in the war room. Sounds easy when you say it.
I have Will Anderson down wearing number 0 already.
Paul, as we look more to the interior defensive line, defensive tackle, how set are the Cardinals where they are right now?
Well, you guys said it. J.J. Watt retired. Zach Allen, no longer. It is a definite need. I mean, if you use multiple picks in the first and second round, let's say you trade down and you cash those in on defensive linemen, I would not be surprised. You need to bolster this position group. Now look, there are players on this list who have had some reps in the NFL. There are some who are on prove-it deals. L.J. Collier, former first-round pick of Seattle, for example. But you can find some really talented players in this draft beyond just the Will Anderson, the elite pass rushers. Brian Brzee, if you end up in the top 10 or you trade down to the middle of the first round, he was the former #1 recruit out of Clemson 3 years ago, 6'6", 320, sort of that wrecking ball right in the middle. There are a bunch of other names out of the Big Ten, out of Wisconsin and Michigan. These are players that are very highly thought of. You can get a top round 2. I would not be surprised. It is a priority. You got to build this defensive line.
I think when you look at the defensive line, when you got a Rashard Lawrence, if he can stay healthy, if you got L.J. Collier trying to prove that he is worthy of that first-round pick once upon a time, even Carlos Watkins not on here, a guy that was steady with Dallas, I think you've got some rotation guys, but I think you need some kind of impact player in there.
Don't forget, Jonathan Ledbetter was the first name Monty Ossenfort mentioned when asked about the D-line at the scouting combine. So that should tell you something already off the bat, what he thinks and what this coaching staff thinks of Ledbetter. And don't forget the wild card in all this when you talk about defensive tackles in the draft, Jalen Carter. Now, he is only working out or visiting teams in the top 10, but the further you get away from what happened off the field and everything else, I do think that more and more teams will take a second and third and fourth look at Jalen Carter.
Possible wild card. It's clear the Cardinals have work to do in the trenches. However, one of the positions that they don't seem to have much work to do in the draft would be linebacker. The Cardinals are set with their 3 linebackers, Zaven Collins, Isaiah Simmons, and Kaiser White, who the Cardinals signed this offseason, most recently with the Philadelphia Eagles. And look at these other names. Chris Barnes, the Cardinals re-signed Ezekiel Turner. You have Jesse Luketa. The Cardinals have plenty of linebackers, which probably brings magic to many Cardinals fans' ears as we talk about the draft. The question mark is Isaiah Simmons. The head coach, Jonathan Gannon, has talked about that this defensive staff doesn't really quite know where Simmons is going to fit. They want to get him onto the field and see where he feels more comfortable, whether that is more as a linebacker or more as a safety, where he spent most of his time on the field last season. However, the Cardinals have plenty of depth in that linebackers room. That's not to say they're not going to add more throughout the offseason, through after the draft, free agents that are still going to be out there available. This is a very low draft need in my eyes.
I would agree, and I think with the number of guys that they've signed in free agency, I don't think you need to really worry about that.
Speaking of free agency, the Cardinals lost their top cornerback, Byron Murphy, who signed with the Minnesota Vikings. So right now, when you're looking at cornerbacks, Craig, it's really Marco Wilson, Antonio Hamilton, and then some players who don't have a ton of experience.
I would add, though, Simmons, when you're talking about trying to figure out a potential position, because he did play a lot of slot corner last season, so that's another name to consider. But as Paul likes to say, if you can't get after the quarterback, then you better have guys who can cover your pass catchers. And in this draft, if the Cardinals do trade down, 3 names to keep an eye on at the cornerback position: Devin Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez, and Joey Porter Jr. Those 3, you see a lot of the mock drafts and look at a lot of the talking heads, talking draft. Those are the top 3. Now, again, you're not going to use one at number 3, but should you trade down, yes, cornerback is a need, even with an Isaiah Simmons and those names up there.
And it's considered a very deep cornerback class this year. If you were to get a corner top of round 2, it could be a round 1 caliber player in years past. Even top of round 3, you can find a really talented corner in this draft. According to most of the scouts and the analysts out there, this is very deep. So I think the Cardinals do get a corner, but I'm not going to sweat it if they don't get it on day 1. And if it's late in day 3, late in day 2, a round 3 pick, then I think that's a possibility, and it's someone who could contend right away for playing time.
Not as deep of a draft class would be the safeties. However, good news for the Cardinals is they have their 2 starting safeties in Budda Baker and Jalen Thompson. However, I still think that it could make sense if you see a safety that you like day 3, lower in the draft, that you like, maybe is a little more raw, needs to have that potential, but they still need to fine tune their skills. I'd be okay with taking a safety late in day 3. I think that for what the Cardinals do on defense, you're pretty set with Budda Baker and Jalen Thompson as your top 2.
You can count on those 2, as the Cardinals have the past couple of seasons. Yes, in the NFL, you don't get younger, you do get older, so it is a position that at some point you're going to have to address. But again, given the number of needs that this team has on both sides of the line of scrimmage, safety to me is just not a high priority.
There's 3 sides to the ball, and we're got to give love to special teams, so let's talk about the needs that they might have there. So the Cardinals re-signed kicker Matt Prater, who went 43 of 50 on field goals last season, 17 of 18 on extra points. He signed a 2-year deal. Right now, their long snapper, Joe Fortunato, because Aaron Brewer is a free agent, and their punter, Nolan Cooney, Andy Lee is a free agent. So it might look a little different. Paul, a draft need for the Cardinals?
Now look, I've taken a lot of scorn over the years, okay? I've advocated for drafting a punter, okay?
I know you have.
Yes, and I've taken a lot of heat from it, but you know, I think if you go back through history, if you take a punter in round 6 or 7, it can pay off, especially if you get some extra picks through some other trades. So I'm gonna die on that punter hill once again. I have no problem with that. Also, you need some guys with athleticism, maybe a backup safety who's an assassin on special teams. I could see that on day 3 as well. Someone with a lot of athleticism can start out with Jeff Rodgers and special teams and then maybe work his way into the backup safety role. That's a possibility.
Once again, we're sending you to the war room, Paul.
Punter, please consider it. Okay, decision makers, please.
Whether or not you agree a punter might be a draft need for the Cardinals, well, that's up to you. Be sure to check out our Draft Primers Offense Edition as well, and all draft coverage leading up to the draft at the end of April on azcardinals.com.